Okay, thank you for checking out the Genius 180-day video series. Here we're getting into what happened so far. All right, so what happened so far? Well, over the last 180 days, something quite significant with the Genius share price. There's massive growth. Now, Genius shares, before I talk about phase 3 being done, Genius shares are they are the thing that drives revenue. It's kind of like dividends that you get paid. So when you have Genius shares, you're getting paid every day. This is where the whole Genius mining thing comes in. When you're mining for Genius, you're holding shares and you're earning revenue every day. Doing some other things too, but now that phase 1 is done, what we saw is that the APY established itself at about 7.7%. So annually, people who are holding Genius shares are making 7.7%. Well, this is based on advanced miners or credit miners, and this is only based on the first 180 days. That's just the average for the first 180 days. Well, the average now is over 16% APY. It's pretty significant. But there's a big reason for this. So I'm going to go over some of the biggest takeaways for Genius shares. These are the things that make Genius better than anything else. So these big takeaways here, excuse me, this is one part that makes Genius better than anything else. So to acquire Genius shares, you have to pay Genius token. And that share value, the rate to get Genius shares, it's already up 11%. It's up 11% since half a year ago. And it's going to keep rising. It's going to keep rising because Genius enforces that the share rate rises over time. This is a very important economic. So in 6 months from now, December 2023, the share value is going to be up another 11%. Well, a year later, in December 2024, for that year, Genius will be up 36% from the prior year. That's a lot of growth. December 2025, Genius will be up 40% from the prior year. And then December 2026, Genius will be up 38% from the prior year. This is a lot of growth. Well, let's visualize it. Cool, huh? We finally have some pictures. I got to take a break for a second and say, I know that I have kind of like a professor voice, and some people have said ASMR. Well, I think that's a good thing. I think that allows this information to get locked into your mind eventually. So look at this. This is a graph of the increase of Genius's share rate. This is the minimum increase of Genius's share rate. Now, what's beautiful about Genius is many of the things are known in the future. I mean, that's what was amazing about Bitcoin and the economics predictabilities, is the future was transparent. So what we have here is on the bottom, we have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 days, 4,000 days. We have a timeline of like 12, 13, 14 years. And we see that the increase in the Genius share rate is a lot in the beginning. Think of it like a Ferrari that somebody's racing the Ferrari, but they're stopped. They're stopped at a stoplight. And then when they start, like when the Genius contract starts, they hit on the gas. And hitting on the gas, they accelerate. They're just they're accelerating very quickly. Very quickly. They blow past 60 miles per hour in a few seconds. They blow past 100 miles per hour in 7 to 8 seconds. And then when they start getting up to 180 miles per hour, their acceleration is not as much. Well, that's how the Genius share price looks. A big takeaway here is that the best time to buy Genius shares is now, is today. And to do that, you create miners. You create miners with a set amount of Genius. Those Genius tokens that you create the miner with, those are used basically to buy shares. And that is what earns you revenue every day. And recently we had here, let's put this here. Recently we just crossed about this area. Yep. And the first 3.5 years, well, that's when this minimum increase, that's when the increase of the rate of the price of these shares, that's when it's going to increase the most, right here. That's the first 3.5 years. Look at that. And then it tapers off afterwards. What you have is you have a graph that actually looks kind of like this for the Genius price, for the price for the shares. And the key takeaway here is the first 3.5 years, that's your timeline. That's like kind of like the phase one of Genius. That's when people have the best opportunity to secure their share position. And this is a very important economic. And these are the things that make Genius better than anything else. Well, it's the fact that this APY we speak of, this return, these dividends people are getting, most of it, or the extra revenue, it's from real sources of revenue. That's important because in this decentralized finance world, all other staking tokens and mining assets, they have only artificial revenue. Now, even Bitcoin, a majority of its revenue for Bitcoin miners, the majority of that revenue is artificial. Yet Bitcoin has done so amazing for a few reasons. And we'll go over that in this entire presentation. Well, the future, what's it called? The future video series go into this in detail. Other sources of real revenue are from Genius NFT sales and resale royalties. More on that in future videos too. I know everybody's very excited about this. These are real sources of revenue. Now, there was an NFT boom, and the boom with Genius NFTs, different story. I'm looking forward to that. That could be an even bigger boom, and it results in real sources of revenue for Genius shareholders. Now, there are other sources of revenue here, of real revenue, but remember, this is what has happened so far on the Genius smart contract over the last 6 months, is that a established share rate, well, there's the predictable share rate, but I'm sorry, I misspoke. What has been established is that there was an average APY of 7.7%, and what we have here is that those earnings, that annual percentage yield, return on inventory, that's climbed to over 16% already, and it's because of these real sources of revenue. Other sources of real revenue, such as share auctions. If you don't know what a share auction is, you'll find out. And also the mining fees. The mining fees is not significant for revenue, but the mining fees do something to Genius that people don't expect. Genius is seen as an inflationary token, but it's not. Let me tell you about these mining fees. When you're mining, you're using your Genius shares. I mean, you're not doing anything. It's happening passively. As you get your passive income, you're getting passive revenue. But you see, the Genius contract, it wants you to break your commitment. If you have an advanced miner, the Genius contract wants you to break that commitment. It wants you to it wants you to end your miner early. And if you don't end your miner early, this is all valuable information to the artificial intelligence that Genius harnesses. This allows the AI to adjust its accounting. Well, for example, why would someone, when you have a miner and you said that you were going to mine for 365 days, and today that's looking like that's going to be at least 16% APY, why would you end that early? Well, you would end it early so that you could get your original Genius back and so that you could get as much of your revenue. Now let's say on the open market, the price of Genius skyrockets. It doubles, it triples. Well, let's put it this way. If your average price of Genius that you buy is $1 and the market price goes to $2, you're probably not going to care about the miner fees. If you want to end early and you want to cash out, you probably won't care about it. Well, let me move on to some other things here, and I'll get back to that. So also, miner fees are generated when you don't return your shares on time. So let's say you promised to hold onto your shares for 1,000 days. You can't hold onto your shares forever. You promised for 1,000 days, and then you forget about them. Well, when you forget to release your shares, when you forget to return them on time, it ends up diluting everyone else. So to combat that dilution, there's a fee there's a late fee, and then that goes to the miners who are continuing to mine. So this is another source of real revenue. You could call this artificial revenue and redistribution, but the point here is that when users are ending early, the revenue they generated, it scales down. Well, once again, why would somebody end early? People would end early because it's worth it for them. Maybe they're not getting as much monetary value, and it was worth it because they were in a crunch, and that was the most liquid thing at the time, unfortunately. Or maybe and in most of the cases with many tokens during the bull market, is that it was just too sexy. The price had risen so much that people didn't want that commitment anymore. They wanted the liquidity. They wanted to cash out. So Genius uses this information to determine, it's worth it for people to cash out. So Genius will scale its rewards down, just for that user though, and for future users. Future users who break their commitment. Now this isn't a bad thing when you're. This isn't a bad thing when you have Genius shares for a long period of time, as the scale will move back up in your favor. But what we have here is that ending early, when you do end early, it's worth it. Maybe worth it, but in a bull market, possibly very worth it. In a bear market, also possibly very, very much worth it. But when people end early, the Genius token, their rewards, some of them get burned. Because once again, the share rewards, they scale down as a result. This turns Genius into a deflationary token. Some call Genius an inflationary token, and it does inflate. People are also paid with an artificial revenue source of inflation. However, when the Genius market, when the open market is doing really good and it's very enticing for people to break their commitments early, or even when it's doing really bad and people want to break their commitments early, Genius ends up becoming deflationary, which, when it comes to supply and demand, fundamentals, economics, this is one of the many keys that adds to Genius's value.